All right. Well, I think now is a great time to start, and at least we can get some introductions out of the way. Thank you and welcome everyone for joining our quarterly Talk Birdie to Me webinar. For anyone who's worked with us in the past knows how much we love our bird puns. So here's one. You're welcome. I'm Anna Crowe. I'm the CEO and founder of Crowe PR. And for those who don't know who we are a integrated public relations and influencer marketing agency. And we work with clients of all sizes in the healthcare technology, consumer goods, and hospitality verticals. We're so excited for everyone to join us today as we discuss the future of digital health. And as you can see, we're talking to 4 amazing healthcare and wellness professionals, and they'll be introducing themselves shortly. And I'm also joined here today by a colleague, friend, and an agency partner, Lesion, CEO of Jacob Tyler. So with that, Les, I'm going to pass it over to you to just give us a little overview on Jacob Tyler.
Thanks, Anna. I appreciate it. And nice to meet everyone. My name is Les Lesion. I am the CEO and founder of Jacob Tyler. We are a brand development and digital marketing agency. We've been in business now for 21 years in San Diego. And I'm excited to be here. And we're joined by some really great panelists, as you said. Anna, we've got Todd Wood, Chris Nicholson, Mirdad Hadari, and Matt Breeze. They'll introduce themselves in just a second, and you get to know a little bit more about them for the course of this. And obviously, they're going to provide their insight on the future of digital health. And you know, guys, if there are people in the webinar that have any questions, there's a Q&A box where you could submit them to the panelists, and we'll get to them. And Anna will moderate that as we move forward. So with that, I guess let's pass it back to you, Anna, and we'll start getting the questions going.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Les. All right. Well, the first one's a pretty easy one. We'd love for you to briefly introduce yourself. Give us a little overview of who you are, your company, and of course, your role in the company. Todd, why don't we go ahead and start with you, and then we'll pass it over to Chris.
Okay. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Les. And I'm glad to be here on this panel, and I'm really looking forward to hearing all of the content today. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Durham Tech. I oversee sales, marketing, and within marketing is our digital health platform and payer access. And Durham Tech is a leading genomics company, and we're creating a category of precision medicine in dermatology. So we'll call it precision dermatology. And we're enabled by our first inline product, which is called the Pigmented Lesion Assay, or PLA. And we use a smart sticker to lift tissue off of the skin. So it's a non-invasive way to genomically test for melanoma. And our key value proposition is it's a non-invasive approach to actually detect more melanoma early and miss less, so you don't have to go through the biopsy process. So I'm excited to talk about that technology and how we're leveraging digital health to make people aware of that type of technology.
Fantastic. Thank you, Todd. We're thrilled to have you on today. Chris, we'll pass it over to you.
All right, wonderful. Well, Anna, Les, thanks for having us, and share the appreciation for the time and the topic here today. So Chris Nicholson, co-founder and CEO of Impulse Mobile, a digital health engagement company in Los Angeles, California. A little bit of history. For the company, I've been in the population health and digital health space for about 15 years now. I was the chief operating officer for Humana's Health and Wellness Division, and managing about 14 million members in that particular practice. Founding Impulse about 6 years ago, we've scaled up to 65 million members that we're engaging for large health plans, IDNs, provider networks such as Kaiser Permanente, Providence, Humana, United Health Group, and others. And so, our focus is really helping them better communicate and engage their patient and member populations through digital mechanisms, digital channels. And so our strategy has been really directed around conversational AI and leveraging all of the channels that are available to us, whether SMS, rich communication services, email, outbound voice, et cetera, to really develop the most appropriate strategy, but doing so in a truly real-time engagement model, compared to the sort of historical sort of, outbound or push type mechanisms that existed before.
Very cool, Chris. Thanks, man. I guess since Matt and Mirdad are my friend and Jacob Tyler clients, I'll tell them to get going and tell us about them.
Are you saying they're not my friends?
No, sorry. Matt, please.
Absolutely. So thanks for having me, and good afternoon to the folks on the East Coast. Good morning to those on the West Coast. I found out that I'm the only East Coast panelist today. But anyway, my name is Matt Priest, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at MMIT. Yes, I am the only non-suite C-suite person on the panel today, so I do want to say it's a real honor to be here. So a little bit about me. I've been with the company for nearly 9 years, during which we've been able to double the business 6 times. I've spent most of my time building out the marketing function under the commercial team, but recently moved over into product leadership, where I'm defining really what it means to launch new products into a new healthcare ecosystem. So I like to say that it's felt like I've worked at 4 or 5 different companies during my tenure here. And for those that are unfamiliar, MMIT is really a leading provider in patient access data, technology, and insights to pharma manufacturers, as well as healthcare organizations as a whole. Our focus is really helping clients understand barriers to access for patients, reducing the time it takes to get patients on therapies they need through data and insights that help you understand how your drug is covered under a health plan. Again, very much looking forward to the discussion here today.
Right on, Matt. Thanks, man. And Mardad?
Let me start off by saying it's a pleasure to be here and to discuss the future of the healthcare and wellness industry. I'm Mardad Haidari, and I started Nature Gains LLC. We started back in 2019, late 2019, right at the beginning of the pandemic. And well, our mission has been to create plant steroids and have alternative to all the banned substances out there that are extremely harmful for our bodies. And we came out with our first product last year, and yeah, it's been going well. We've had a lot of issues, but I'm excited. I'm excited to move forward, and yeah.
Very cool. Thanks, Mardad.
Wonderful. Well, welcome, as I said earlier. And as a follow-up to that, we want to start with a question that's in everyone's mind. Obviously, the past year has created enormous change in multitude of industries, but most certainly in the healthcare industry and the wellness spaces as well, right? So the first question is, what are the biggest changes and shifts that your businesses have experienced and dealt with in the past year? Let's start with Chris for this one. Chris, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been an interesting year. It's been a challenging year, but it's been one that I think really drove a lot of focus in the sector. For us, the topic that I think is most notable from a change perspective is the populations that we're engaging in, really understanding and learning about, those health disparities. And so, if you look back sort of 3 or 4 years ago, it was more around sort of persona-based or sort of broader engagement into those populations. But because of, COVID and the pandemic, really, I think shined a spotlight on, underserved populations, people of color, minorities, low-income, populations, especially as we serve a lot of Medicaid members across the US. And so really understanding how to drive, digital health engagement for those underserved populations was different than the way that we were typically communicating and engaging before. The thing that was actually really successful about that is when we really started to understand it, is that they engage in digital channels actually at a rate almost 2 to 1 compared to any other channels. And so once we sort of opened up the door and realized that this was the target, and then engaging them through SMS and other mechanisms, because that is the lifeline, that is the connection that they have to this healthcare universe that's out there. So that was the biggest change for us when we think about it, and that was helping them get access to mail order, to lower cost alternatives in medication, connecting back to services to find immunizations, where again, they didn't have really strong provider networks that were supporting those populations before. So that's the one I'd probably underline first and foremost.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. That makes a lot of sense. How about you, Todd? What have you and the Durham Tech team seen over the past year or so?
Yeah, so very similar observations that Chris has. And Chris, we're going to need to talk because you'll see how these will start coming together. Well, as I mentioned earlier, we're creating a category of precision dermatology, and that's new to dermatology. But when you look at precision medicine, it's probably the biggest breakthrough in cancer detection ever, because now you can non-invasively and precisely detect cancer early and do it at a much lower cost, right? And so that is a huge breakthrough. And as we're bringing it into dermatology, we go into the pandemic. And when you look at the unmet need that we meet, the only solution, if someone has a suspect mole or they're concerned about skin cancer, is to go into a surgical procedure in an office until we have come along. Because in the pandemic, and that kind of raised the awareness about this need, is now you could serve that need in the comfort of your own home, where you could do a telemedicine visit, and then we are able to send our collection kit to the patient, and they could collect the specimen themselves under the supervision of a provider. And then we could run the test, and the results are going to let you know if it's urgent and you have to get in for that medical procedure or that surgical procedure, or if you're going to be fine at a high level of confidence that it's okay. So you can see how that really pivoted our business with a strong investment into digital health, so we can help patients have that relationship with us or develop it, and create the awareness that that technology is there. And so some of the things Chris has mentioned, we can develop that relationship with an organization like us and then link them to providers that could treat them that way.
No, that's fantastic, Todd. Thank you for sharing that. And Mehrdad, obviously Nature Gains is a slightly different type of business. Can you tell a little about the impact on your company?
Well, we had a lot of uncertainty since the beginning of the pandemic because all the gyms were closed. And with a product like ours, it gives you, like, you need to be working out almost every day. So demand was not there for the product in the beginning, but as the gym started opening up, we had the rapid growth, and it caused issues with our supply chains because a lot of our ingredients are coming from overseas. And I'm not sure if you guys have heard, but at the Long Beach port, the ships are just sitting there waiting in line till they can upload. So we've been sold out for almost 6 weeks now, and the lead time was supposed to be 8 to 10 weeks on the manufacturing, but it's like 16 to 18 weeks now. And that creates an issue because when you don't have product, your competitors are gaining your customers every day. So I would say the biggest challenges for us have been the supply chains. And honestly, the fact that you can't anticipate when you're going to sell out and how much inventory you should have. It's just this past year, it's just a lot of, I would say uncertainty and supply chain issues.
Right. And you mentioned it's different issues a year ago and then 6 months ago and now, right? So keeping up with those dynamics from the external environment, but different types of external environments really impacted you. Appreciate you sharing that. Matt, you want to round us out on this one?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the interesting things about, MMIT, and I think a lot of healthcare technology companies, is that as the healthcare industry becomes more complicated, there's more of a need, right, for capabilities, for data, for insights that really help you understand sort of what's happening in the market. What do I need to do? What's signal versus noise? So as an example, during the first few months of the pandemic, we didn't have a single prospect or client conversation that didn't involve the buyer on the other end asking for insights, for data about how COVID is impacting their business, right? Whether it was how are health plans reacting to the pandemic and how are they adjusting coverage or reimbursement. And this really inspired us to create a lot of market research capabilities that were very much focused on responding to those needs and challenges and tracking how current events are going to impact their access. It really kind of, in terms of day-to-day operations, I think one of the more ironic developments is that we actually felt more connected to our clients and partners, and looking for sort of silver linings. I think the way our industry has embraced, video conferencing is just incredible. In some ways, the pandemic was sort of the catalyst that I think helped push a lot of folks over the hump, embracing tools that would connect people across the world. We had a lot of laughs early on with clients about things like bad hair days and dogs barking in the background, but it really made the connection more human, and you really get to know each other a lot more, even if, some of the things you don't want to know, right? So I think, the last change was just around, like others, we've experienced, this adoption towards virtual events and engaging, clients in different ways. In our industry, trade shows are huge hubs of collaboration, business. Without them, a lot of companies, had to pivot and go virtual. So we learned a lot about what works, what doesn't. Came out of 2020 with actually a stronger ROI than the previous in-person events. So we felt the impact, but we've done our best to kind of go with the tide instead of against it.
That's great to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, and guys, I know that, also clearly over the past, year, and I know for me over the past 20 years, I've watched the health and wellness industry continue to grow, evolve, and how we communicate and market our clients. So I guess a question I have for you is, in this past year, maybe more specifically, how has it affected how you have had to communicate with your clients or customers? And as well, even how have you had to pivot and communicate with your internal stakeholders, right? Your employees, et cetera. Obviously, video is an easy answer, but are there other things that you could share with us? So in this situation, let's start with Todd, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's a good question, and communication's always critical with any business, and with the digital platforms, you can just be so much more efficient with it. And I'll give you an example of what we're working through right now. Is it's as I've been talking about melanoma a little bit with our product, it is Melanoma Awareness Month this month, and so we have a campaign that we just launched, and it's the hashtag Stick It to Melanoma. And we're trying to drive this campaign across many of our stakeholders, because we're offering a pledge of up to $1 million to key partners within the space, like the Melanoma Research Foundation and AIM, et cetera. And we want to raise awareness around getting in for a skin check. So how do we communicate that effectively and efficiently across stakeholders? So we have a significant social presence right now, and we're using all components of our digital platform to communicate that to consumers. But we also have a channel of providers to involve. So how do we involve our providers? There's been digital communication to our providers with a whole suite of social assets. So we put together a social toolkit for all these providers. And in the dermatology category, some of them that are of the aesthetic nature have a pretty good digital platform, and they have their own community to communicate with, but many other medical oriented providers don't. So they need to be taught how to do that. So we prepared everything for them. We shoot it out to them digitally. They can download all the material and then spread that out through their channels as well. So that's one way that we're leveraging it right now, because we have to be efficient with the communication. And now we're managing it through a social community. They can post things on our website. We're trying to build a movement with that through initial communication that just started on Monday.
Really cool. Thanks, Todd. Chris?
Yeah, great points. And I'll I'll start with the internal associate one first, and I'll come back to external client. It's been an interesting one for us because, as a Southern California, company, it's a really dynamic office environment that we haven't had for, over a year now, with, happy hours and free lunches and, hikes at lunchtime and, Pokemon outings, like all the things that you can sort of imagine, like they're happening sort of in that environment that, you try to replicate in a digital structure. And so, we've really put a dedicated resource on the team focused on how to engage our team digitally. And so what types of activities and things that we're doing on new hire orientations and onboarding to support that, because I think we've hired 45 people since the pandemic started that we've never met, in person in the office. And so that's pretty dramatic for us, because nobody was ever hired before unless they had lunch with me. And I know that sounds old school, but we don't do that anymore, right? We just can't. And so things have sort of evolved past that. On the client side, I do miss the conferences. I miss those face-to-face connections and meeting with, 65 people in 8 hours at a healthcare event, that sort of runs through the course of the day. But the one strategy that we deployed that I think is really effective, and I think others could leverage, is we created a client advisory council with executives from our customers and then some that are prospects that we feel will have down the line in the near future. And we bring them together on a monthly basis. We actually give them some equity in the business. And so we want them to be really vested in the strategy. And, it helps us. So we're giving them roadmap items and, talking to them about different solutions, new strategies, trying to hear from them what are the things that are evolving inside of their business that then we can use to sort of tune and tailor our product roadmap and our strategies going forward. And so, we've had about 5 of those events really, in the last 5 months, and it's just been extremely helpful at keeping us connected, where we were really feeling disconnected the first 6 months of the pandemic. So hopefully, others can, deploy something similar.
Chris, it's not that old school, speaking of hiring, by the way, because we do the same thing. And I always have lunch with the new person starting. But what I've noticed also as well that this has brought is a new sense of the ability to remote hire. And so we just hired actually a gentleman in Honolulu, and we hired a woman in Denver. So,
Right.
and they're still a part of the team, but it's weird for me because I'm like, well, aren't we supposed to go to lunch? And I want to go to Hawaii to do it, but we'll see what happens next. So how about you, Matt?
Absolutely agree.
Yeah. How about you, Matt?
Sure. Yeah. So internally, I think we tried a little bit of everything up front. So I think different teams took a slightly different approach, right? We would have town halls with our executive team, and we would kind of go through updates, which were great. What we were a little bit concerned about was participation, right? And people asking questions when you've got 300 people on a Zoom. But we've had some really good results from people kind of, asking questions, engaging, right, getting direct responses, without having to email back and forth on things. So I think internally that's been great. We've also done, virtual happy hours, all that good stuff. And recently we've been, fortunate enough, we've got this quad at the Yardley office where we can, basically get together every, week, every couple of weeks, and just see faces, which has been honestly amazing. Like, I think can't really, overstate how helpful it is to kind of see everyone's face again. So, and then from a client and prospect standpoint, really before the pandemic, we were very dependent on email and LinkedIn, kind of the traditional, communication mechanisms, and it worked, right? So we didn't really have this need to diversify, across different channels until the pandemic, right? So one of the things that really we kind of call 2020 the year of channel diversification. After the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a pretty big impact on our email engagement, LinkedIn engagement, and a lot of that was driven off of competing for attention, right? Other companies were defaulting to the same approach, crushing people's inboxes. And fortunately, we had a number of org changes. We got new talent on the team, new budget for new technologies. So we deployed tools like Drift to improve live chat on our website. We've got HighSpot for content management, really as a way to ensure that the sellers are delivering meaningful, targeted, helpful content in their pitches. And we're working with the product team to just find out better ways to do in-app communication and engagement. So, it's kind of interesting. Like, I think while standing out becomes harder and harder with all the noise out there, we're also seeing a direct response to this challenge with just new technologies popping up and services, popping up to really cut through the noise. So one of the things in particular that I really enjoy is we've had a lot of good feedback around sending personalized gifts, right? Deliveries to clients and prospects, sometimes, for meeting with us, gaining insight, other times just sort of out of the blue. It kind of goes a long way.
Yeah, I love channel diversification. That's really well put. Mehrdad?
You guys are helping us,
Yeah, I know. Thank you. Mehrdad.
Yeah, so internally, not much has changed with us because I have one partner, which is also the lawyer for the company itself. He does all the legal work, and we talk once a week on the phone and we go over everything. So not much has changed for us, But externally, I like what Todd said, how a digital platform is much more effective. From the start, we wanted to be a fully e-commerce based business, to avoid overhead costs, and at the same time, you can be much more effective with your time. And honestly, over the past year, it's just solidified our position, and we can see that the future is moving towards that. People are moving away from meeting in person, they're moving away from trade shows, all those kind of things, and we're positioned well to take advantage of that. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. And as a reminder to all of our attendees, please feel free to start putting your questions in the Q&A box. I noticed we've got one pop up. I do have a question to Chris about Pokemon outings, but I will save that for a separate discussion, but more to come on that, Chris. The next question is all about digital health. And I started to hear some of that in your previous answers, but there are a lot of discussions around digital health and different definitions of it. So what we'd love to know is, what is your definition of digital health and how are you leveraging digital in your business? And Matt, why don't we go ahead and start with you for this one?
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm kind of a metaphor guy, so I'm gonna use a little bit of a metaphor here. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with the show The Nick on HBO, but basically follows this Dr. Thackeray early 20th century. And it's intended to take place at the Knickerbocker Hospital in New York. He's constantly searching for innovations in medicine and surgical technology. He didn't have a computer or electronic health records, but he was, constantly reaching for ways to improve patient care. When you look back at time, I think documentation of medical records, probably, the 20s, computers came around the 60s, and that really brought this sort of world of health information management. And, we're here 60 years later, and yeah, we've definitely come a long way, but we know there are still massive, gaps in digital health. I'm a bit biased because of where I work, but, to me, digital health really centers around the data and the ability to really insert that data in the right places and workflows to treat patients. I measure success of digital health by the adoption of this data by the most old school stakeholders in the healthcare ecosystem, right? Like Dr. Thackeray, when and where does he need this data? Will he embrace it or become frustrated and sort of just go with his instinct? Does access to this data actually reduce the time it takes to get a patient treated? These are all questions that I know keep, our team up at night, and we're constantly looking to be on the cutting edge of really how information is used to get the end result of healthier people. So we leverage data analytics technology in everything we do. Sometimes we're just aggregating this data. In other cases, we're actually guiding the development and support of our pharma companies in the way in which they're going to market. So it definitely drives a lot of what we do in particular, and it's very, very important to what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, it's a great one. It makes me, when you ask the question, Anna, I think about the last HIMSS conference that I was at in Orlando, which is basically, I see Matt screening, it's about 1 million square foot facility, that's everything in digital health, from, devices that are used in exam rooms and surgery, technology, devices, all the way over to analytics, platforms for engagement and down the line. And so, it's a very, very wide market, I think, to that point. And I'm actually kind of okay with that, right? I think it gives us a lot of opportunity of places that we can play and that we can be supportive of that ecosystem in that digital engagement layer. For us, the piece that I think from a definition that I would really call out most specifically is, this sort of shift around digital first, and this digital engagement model in digital health, and where, in our world, it's really about, creating real-time engagements. And so I think the power of digital, regardless, is this real-time nature. And Matt talked about some of the data elements and some of those components, is the fact that you can have a dialogue, you can create engagement, you can learn about that barrier that someone's having today, not 30 days later when you see a claim actually flow through, a health plan, and you can take action and intervention and then shift that behavior and make that change, as you go forward. And so I think, this piece around real-time and accessibility and creating sort of a, this widely distributed access platform, for consumers and all of these different facets, I think, to me, is the most compelling part of the industry and why I get excited about it. So
that's fantastic. And yes, starting with Matt's points around getting that data, understanding analytics, and then taking action on those analytics and doing all the right things. I think those are fantastic definitions of digital. Mirdad, how about you guys? How are you leveraging digital in your business, and what's your definition?
Well, my definition is honestly, it's to be data-driven and then very convenient, to have everything on one platform, to have all the information there, so that you don't have to look around, and to be able to sell something and basically get it to your customer within 2 days. I think, like for me at least, digital health is having all that, basically to be able to do all that in one place. And I like what the guys were saying about the analytics. Like you can basically see what your clients are looking into. You can see what the trends are, and you can basically move to take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And Todd, how about you? How are you and DermTech leveraging this?
Yeah, I'll echo some of the things that were already said, because digital health is such a large term, right? And you could interpret it in many different ways. And I like that digital first comment, right? And I really like leveraging all the data, right? So you can trial and error a lot of things to better communicate with your stakeholders. But here's a definition that I use: is it's leveraging technology to improve the patient experience in our world. And there's certain descriptors that come to mind, and many of these have been said, is empowerment. So you empower that patient, time and convenience, communication, effective and efficient communication, developing relationships, right? Because we all want to develop that relationship in some sort of a community. So why not it be with your health provider so you can learn more along the way? And there's a lot of measurement and education too. A lot of people want to measure their health in this little device and watch it and take control of it, hence empowerment. So that's how we're looking at it, and that's how we're trying to leverage it. And the term access was used recently in the dermatology world. Less than 10% of the US population regularly sees a dermatologist for skin checks. And because of our technology, we have an opportunity to reach out to everyone out there that doesn't see a dermatologist regularly. We can educate them about their healthcare, and then we can build a relationship with them where we can communicate about the technology and hopefully get people to seek care. And at the end of the day, when you're dealing with a cancerous disease, there are people that unfortunately die from melanoma. And we think with technology like this, there's no reason to die from it, and we can get to it early. And so that's how we're leveraging it.
Wonderful, thank you. And to the points earlier, there are so many different ways to look at it and define it, but I love that there was a lot of consistency, but also you guys all have a unique spin on what digital health means and how it's being leveraged in your organization. So appreciate you sharing all that.
Well, and guys, something I'm super interested in actually, especially, since you guys are in this vertical, is what are some of the big trends? You've touched on this maybe a little bit in what you've said earlier currently, but what are things you're seeing coming up over the next few years, big trends in the health and wellness space? I'd like to know. So, Matt, let's start with you on this one.
Sure. So I think it's pretty obvious, right? Every year, the innovation that's occurring within digital health is exponentially growing, right? It's not just growing; it's growing tremendously. And this isn't going to stop, anytime soon. So I think the pandemic, in particular, has sort of redefined what it means to go to the doctor. First and foremost, there's always going to be skeptics that say telehealth will never be the same as going to the doctor's office, and I totally agree with them today. But I do think that there's going to be a day where that line becomes a lot more blurred than it is today. Honestly, I never knew that my doctor was even able to use a computer, let alone be able to provide value and care to me when we met for a telehealth, session. But he did, right? And I think we're going to see a lot of surprises like this. It's not going to happen overnight, but we're already seeing, situations where technology is replacing certain aspects of the human in the world of healthcare. And so I think there's a really important kind of lesson here of how do we let digital health really help streamline the patient journey, but also not replace the sort of need to have a human there. So I think that the big sort of three for me is one, remote patient monitoring and data collection. So we've actually got a three-month-old. We've got a little sock that tracks her pulse oxygen, everything that we need to know, make sure she's okay. Again, it doesn't replace parenting, but if we can kind of quickly check on her, it's certainly peace of mind, right? Telehealth, right, is a second big area. Virtual diagnosis kind of in there. And then I think behavioral health. So when it comes to that third one, I think that the pandemic has really shined a light on mental health. And we're already seeing a lot of health plans putting more of a focus on ensuring that members, patients are getting access to the care that they need. So I think as each of these areas move into the future, again, it kind of comes back for me to collecting, trending big data to create more repeatable, data-driven, treatments for patients, whether that means less invasive devices to collect relevant information. Todd, it sounds very, very near and dear to your heart, or, being able to take AI to intake, aggregate and sort of recommend actions based on that data. So I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Cool. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, a great one. And Matt, as you're talking, I'm probably the first to say I will not miss live doctor's office visits. I'm totally okay doing all of it virtually. I want to have all of the testing done for my dermatologist done where you send it to me at home, Todd. So I'm totally already into that universe. And if I never show up at a hospital again, it will be perfect. So I think, for me, when I look at the trends that, kind of put it in this three categories too, that piece that I talked about a little bit earlier and thinking about this digital front door and the way that companies are leveraging, the inbound, right? And so thinking about the front door not again as this sort of the shift where healthcare was all about sort of pushing content to consumers. And now it's really shifting where, consumers are saying, hey, I want to learn more about X, Y, or Z. And they can come into those different mechanisms, whether that's, through, live chatbots, through AI, inbound, SMS, even interactive IVR capabilities. They're really moving to those much more than sort of web portals or even apps just because of some of the barriers to those. And so the piece where that becomes really important, it's about, the way that our plans talk about it, the providers is this sort of digital triage or digital concierge service. And so, just to put that in context a little bit is the fact that I may have a question and say, hey, I'm this many years old, should I have a colonoscopy this year? And you're literally just messaging that into the health plan. And the health plan says, oh, they're looking then connecting back to your, your health record. They're seeing that you haven't had one. And all that's happening in real time where it says, hey, you actually had one a year ago. You're fine. You can do it next year. Or yes, let me help you get that scheduled. And all that's happening through this interactive, digital concierge to make that work. And it's, again, improving that, patient member experience, creating a tremendous amount of cost efficiency on the provider and plan side. And so I think we're going to continue to see more and more investment. And when we talk to our partners on the Client Advisory Council, those are the types of places where they're investing because they want to provide better experience, better service, but they're under tremendous cost pressure to do so. And I think these inbound technologies will be really supportive there. The second one, just to mention, and then I'll still leave it at that, is the RCS or ABC. So if folks are familiar with Rich Communication Services or Apple Business Chat, these are the interactive mechanisms that allow for app-like experiences over a text messaging type solution. And so you've got buttons, the ability to swipe, you've got icons, you can do all of those types of things that in the past required a consumer, to have to download to engage in a particular utility. The easy example, because I know everybody here on the call is probably on LinkedIn. And have you ever gotten the message on LinkedIn and it says, congratulate Anna on her work anniversary. And it automatically pops up 4 or 5 little buttons that says, congrats, Anna, good job, and those are like defaults, so that's effectively what RCS is over an SMS experience. And so you're helping sort of give the pathway and those recommended results that people just fall right into and sort of helps guide them through the process. So again, reducing customer friction and making a better experience that we'll be able to deliver through healthcare here soon enough.
Thanks, Chris. Mehrdad?
Well, I would say for supplements, we're a bit more, we're further down the line. A lot of customers are moving away from stores. People don't need to go to stores anymore. And like, let's say 10 years ago, if you weren't in GNC, your product wouldn't make it, or any of the vitamin shops. We don't have that issue anymore. And if anything, those stores, they're going to be dying down over the next 5 to 10 years. Like, everyone's moving towards e-commerce based businesses, and it's mainly because of convenience. And also you probably would have a cheaper price because your overhead costs are lower down the line.
Okay, thanks, Mehrdad. That makes sense. Todd?
Yeah, that's a good comment there, because when I look at our business, there's procedures, right, which would require you to be in the office, but then there's a pivot to a lot of care that's non-procedural oriented, right? And so that can drive a huge market for telemedicine. So when I look at what's changing relative to healthcare in general, I've been talking about precision genomics, and that's a very significant change that's continuing to build upon itself. I think in the future, every time we see a doctor about something, we're going to get a genomics test to understand exactly what it is. And then we're going to get a genomics test to tell us exactly what the treatment is. So there's 100% effectiveness on that treatment, right? And the categorical term for that is personalized medicine. So we're going to have precision medicine and personalized medicine. And then as we branch into the digital world, I think we're crossing the chasm right now, or we're at that point for telehealth where more people have had that experience. And as Chris mentioned, he's not going back, right? Once you try it, I'm kind of in the same camp. And so another big item on the horizon is the regulatory environment, right? So there's a lot of cash models for telehealth. The reimbursement models have not gotten there yet. And so there's going to be some regulatory changes that start to open up the doors for reimbursement for telehealth and digital health.
Great answers, guys, really.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely. And you all touched on some powerful trends that are taking place in health and wellness. With that, are there any major shifts that you see happening in the way you engage with customers and how you're marketing to your audiences? Can you talk about this a little bit? Chris, why don't we start with you on this one?
Yeah, so from a marketing and positioning standpoint, it has, I think, the where we were spending our marketing dollars has shifted, right? Where a lot of our world in the past, as I mentioned, was through events and sort of conferences and those types of things. I do see that we're going to be back to that, but on sort of smaller forums. And so we're planning, for later this year, next year, sort of smaller client, events where we used to do sort of 200 people or so, in an event. Maybe we'll do sort of more in their markets and do these local sort of forums to create some, some conversation between them as well. Our investments in LinkedIn, advertising and others have gone up tremendously compared to what we're doing in the past. And so really just sort of shifting where the spend happens. And I think we've been pretty happy with the results that we've received. I think that, second quarter was pretty abysmal in some regards because everybody sort of said, oh, we'll be back to work in a few weeks. It won't really matter, right? And then I think we all sort of fell into that routine. But from a client engagement and a selling perspective, our teams have been extremely successful at shifting and actually going more to the virtual pitch. And so that's where a lot of our time and energy has been internally is, those types of dollars on training development so people can really be effective in those conversations virtually versus what, again, was done from a solution selling perspective. And so just a few things that, we're doing and shifting where we have those marketing dollars.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. Mirdad, how about you guys? Can you discuss any shifts that you are taking in your strategy?
Well, yeah, when we started, we were focused a lot on PPC, but for supplements and things that people are putting in their bodies, they need data. And the more we worked on our SEO, the more our sales went up because we were engaging the customers, we were giving them more information about our product. And the other thing is that I feel like bloggers and influencers are going to be very important. They are already, but the fact is that they can engage the customers. They have their own fan base, and when they show that the product works for them, that really helps, and that actually captures the customers for us.
Absolutely. We always like to ask where are these customers getting their information from, right? And who's influencing that behavior. So those are really great points. How about you, Todd?
Yeah, when we look at our customer base, I'll take the professional provider side of our customer base first, right? As we've gone through the pandemic, we all pivoted to a virtual type of an engagement. And now things are starting to move back to a traditional in-person engagement. However, we're trying to take what we learned from the virtual engagements and trying to integrate them because as what was mentioned earlier, a lot of us are kind of craving to get back to that face-to-face meeting because that can be very productive, but there's some benefits from the virtual engagement as well. From a consumer, what I referred to earlier is we can just be so efficient with developing a relationship with a consumer. And in our category, people that have UV damage, we can find out where they are, what types of occupations they've had, and they're consenting to engage in a discussion so we can start educating people. So when you know where they are and they want to accept the engagement, then you can be much more efficient, educate them, and then convert them to potential customers.
Awesome. And then Matt, have you guys made any significant changes in your strategy?
Yeah, everyone called out some really good points. I think that the big change for us is the shifting of budgets and frankly the hiring of a lot of talent. As an example, right, we're actually working with Jacob Tyler on a totally new website. And the whole focus of that is encouraging just more interaction with clients and prospects. So having that interaction up front and then having the back end tools on the back end to really understand sort of, let's get smarter about what matters most to each of these different cohorts. In terms of marketing, the diversification of channels again has opened up a lot of those unique partnerships that my fellow panelists have called out. I think I've always loved this idea of how do you get to the 50 influencers that can connect you to the 20,000 buyers, and we're definitely embracing that. So I think moving away from sort of spamming with things like email and moving towards more of a scientific approach when it comes to what are our buyers, really trying to answer, and what are the most pressing, needs, so that we can provide the most value and through content, through engagements. I think the other really critical thing for MMIT has again been the number of new faces that we have. Prior to 2020, MMIT was very much focused, I'll call it a commercially driven company that didn't have a whole lot of new products coming to market. We averaged sort of 0 to 1 per year. In 2021, we're actually deploying, on track to deploy about 10 new products, which is a lot, a pretty big daunting task for a company that's not used to it. So I think that, looking at sort of the product leadership and the investment there, as well as the technology on the back end. And then one cool initiative that has really, I think, inspired a lot of people to kind of collaborate a little bit more. We call it MMIT University. And it's basically a one-stop shop to sort of knowledge transfer, right? What are other folks doing? What do I need to know about what they're doing? And then also that will be served up in very targeted ways to clients. So definitely a lot of things have changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get to our final question, just a quick reminder, feel free to add your questions into the Q&A box and we'll discuss those shortly.
Yeah, there's already actually a couple of good ones in there, including one about QR codes, which I have to tell you, it's like if there's one person that's happy about the pandemic, it's the inventor of the QR code. It's made a bigger comeback than the Brussels sprout in the 21st century. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that. But I'll tell you, so for me, the last question of the day to wrap this up is, what advice can you give businesses and actual, marketing professionals like myself moving forward in the health and wellness space? And by the way, I'm going to let you guys wrestle over who goes first. So, and if no one speaks up, I'll choose you. So don't make me do it.
All right, I can jump in. Happy to.
Right.
So I would say two things, and one will sort of be a circle back to reinforce it. But I would say let's just be really careful and protect the channel, that we're engaging in. And so, I think over the decades, we find a channel that's effective, and then we just overload it. And then we go, gosh, we killed that one. What's the next channel we should use? And then we just bury that one, and then we move on to the next one. And I think, we're at a point where we've got consumers really engaging over these different capabilities. They're leveraging social, they're leveraging influencers, they're leveraging, inbound interactions. Let's really, really look and respect their preferences across the board, and so we don't want them to sort of, start to check those little boxes where they turn off those notifications, they turn off those features and start to shut down in those areas. And so, that's the piece I would just say for all of us is let's be really cognizant of that as we build that out. And then second, I would say that, the strategy, I would just come back to, creating those small, client specific forums, and taking some of those marketing dollars and figuring out how to really engage them. I love the comments that were made, a few that are sending, sort of that welcome package or that kit to a particular new client or, sort of a prospect that's there. I think those are great ways to shift, spending the dollars. That's something we're not doing today. And so I'm going to take that, from the learnings here and see if we can take that back to our team as well. So just a few thoughts.
Next.
I'll jump in here.
Right.
So, I would say feel free to take risks because, in the digital space, the downside of a risk is not as bad as it might have been at least in my background from traditional pharmaceutical and drug device marketing. If you're assessing a new message, a new position, you want to do some A/B testing, you can geo-target, you can put it out there, you can watch the data and you can make some adjustments and really build your plan that way. It's much more efficient, costs less, and you can try a lot of things.
Yeah, Todd, I mean, I love hearing that because optimization and testing is so important and we try to educate people on that all the time. Sometimes you think what you think doesn't work and what you don't think will work does, and you don't know until you see the data.
Yeah.
Mehrdad?
I agree. I think trial and error is extremely important, and I think that taking risks is extremely important as well because, as we just mentioned, the downside isn't as bad. And honestly, I would say to build the business to be as efficient and resilient as possible in case we have something else happen, we have another cloudy day. You want to be able to handle, I guess, all the external factors affecting your business. And also, I wanted to say that focus on the data. make decisions on the data, and we're getting more and more tools to be able to read those numbers. So just use them as much as you can. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Matt.
Yeah, so I loved your number one there with sort of, I think it's so important, right? When we've got, even though all these channels are opening up for us, you know, we can't abuse them, right? And we're kind of in this place where I think for the first time, or at least it's happening more than it's ever happened in the past, where patients and people, right, are so engaged about their health, right? And it's not everywhere, but I think in general, people are now coming, right, and searching for these different answers. And the answer could be, you know, do I need to go to the doctor? The answer could be, you know, do I have my past medical records? I think there's a lot of questions that patients are actively seeking, you know, an answer for, which is fantastic. I love the idea of testing. We are sort of anal about our testing. Like, we will do ABs across the board everywhere until we've really triangulated the best approach. But I think one of the most important things is just being able to you know, be a change maker, right? It's more accepted than ever before, especially in digital health. We know that elements of healthcare are not working, or not working as well as they should. And doctors, patients, healthcare organizations are desperate, right, for new technology, new solutions to really smooth their journey to care. So it might mean trying and failing multiple times, but I feel like as long as you're, you know, learning something along the way, it's a win for you and hopefully healthcare as a whole.
Yep, some wonderful recurring themes there, but all with unique perspective. Well, we've had such an incredible, robust discussion that despite my incessant calls for questions, we only really have time for one, maybe two. And thank you, Duke, for putting these in here. But since Lesion mentioned QR codes, why don't we go ahead and jump into the first one? The first one is, how has the adoption finally, ! Of the QR code shifted your marketing strategies, if any? And feel free to jump in if anybody feels passionately about this one.
I'd be surprised if it did shift for you guys. I'd love to know. I mean, you know.
For us, honestly, you know, it really, we were using QR codes specifically for conferences, right? So we have, you know, an app, Coverage Search, and it's sort of a doctor patient app where you can look up, how is this drug going to be covered for my health plan? And we had a lot of good reception, I think, when we went to trade shows, you know, with that, and people would just scan it and be like, oh, cool, look, I can look up, you know, my asthma drug on there and see how it's covered. Like, yeah, it's you know, it looks correct. You know, outside of that, I think just because of the digital nature and virtual nature of what we're doing, we really haven't had a lot more reps with QR codes. But, you know, I feel like at least in my personal life, I'm using it all the time. So I'd love to hear if anybody else has really good ways of getting it inserted.
It's not one we've taken, you know, this is Chris, it's not one that we've really leveraged much. And so, you know, I think, you know, to that point, it's, you know, having the resurgence. And so we need to think about that from a strategy. But yeah, events and conferences were one of those areas too. But I think it's a great way just to share content, you know, in different ways that, you know, we haven't really thought about before.
Yep, definitely. Merdad or Todd, do you have any thoughts on this one?
We actually haven't used any QR codes with our business, at least, but I can see the value for them in the future to share content and stuff, especially at events. Yeah.
We're in development with it right now. We're in a situation where we're a healthcare provider as a laboratory, and we receive referrals to us from other providers, right? So as there's a trade-off from that patient from a dermatology practice, and then our kit is dispensed or used with the patient, there's an opportunity for QR codes right at that point. And then that can enter the relationship with us, right? And we can guide them through any of the information that they would need on the back end.
Yep, that makes sense. Well, we will happily address the remaining questions offline. And with that, we would love to wrap up our wonderful discussion. Thank you to our panelists, to Les, and for everyone who attended today. We realize it's a busy time, and we appreciate you taking the time to join our Talk Birdie to Me webinar. Say that 3 times fast. We will be posting this recording and sharing it. And with that, thank you all, and I hope you make it a great day.
Thanks, guys. Really great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Guys. Yeah, take care.